Welcome to Life Beyond Abortion, the podcast where we delve into the untold stories and experiences surrounding abortion. Stories often missing from everyday conversations, media reports, and even other podcast interviews. I'm your host, Melissa Ohden, the founder and CEO of the Abortion Survivors Network. As the author of You Carried Me, A Daughter's Memoir, and Abortion Survivors Break Their Silence, I've had the privilege of hearing the most powerful stories from some of the most resilient and courageous individuals. These stories and these people have profoundly transformed my life, and I believe they have the power to transform yours as well. Together, we will amplify these voices, share the truths that they illuminate, and challenge our culture to recognize what life is truly like beyond abortion. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Life Beyond Abortion. I have been so blessed with amazing guests throughout these interviews, but this one in particular is one I've been excited about for a while. You know, I'm honored to know people professionally, but also personally in the pro-life movement, and Steventhen Holland is one of those. Steventhen, his story is going to surprise you, challenge you, encourage you. But I also know that personally, you know, this is just a joy for me to sit down and have this conversation. So I just want to take a moment and introduce my friend, Steventhen Holland, to Life Beyond Abortion. Thank you for joining me, friend.
You are so welcome, Melissa. I'm honored to be here.
Your story is, like I said, I mean, it's challenging, but it's encouraging and beautiful. So I just want to kind of, kick the ball into your court. What would you like people to know about you, Steventhen? Who are you? How have you become who you are?
Right. Well, first of all, I love Jesus with all my heart. So I'm a Jesus lover, Jesus follower. So I think first of all, that's my faith is very important. A family man, a dad of 3 daughters. So I'm a girl dad, outnumbered every day. And that started obviously with my relationship with my wife. We've been married almost going on 19 years now. We just had a daughter graduate high school not long ago, few weeks ago, and so it's that's life, right? But also I have the privilege of being an author. I've authored a book. I'm a worship leader, singer, songwriter. Have a degree in youth ministry, so I was on staff at churches most of my adult life, leading worship and leading students and actually adults in ministry. But then there was this transition that kind of happened in 2015. I actually had the privilege of working for a local pregnancy center doing abstinence education for 3 years. And that was a little different, change in life. But what I realized in that season is I started my book that I had written, which was my life story, which I know we want to chat about today. But I started being able to work my story into these presentations with 7th graders through seniors. And I realized that, I think we all have a testimony, or we do. We all have a testimony, but I started to realize how powerful mine was, like for this movement in the pro-life world, where my focus had been most of my life, at church, which, really should be both. but I think probably most of our listeners might understand that. Like I had a focus on just church world, right? I was on staff. But then in that season, I realized how powerful my story was, Melissa. And you want me to go right into it and share that, or would you?
Yeah, well, and I want to pause there for a second because
Okay.
you raised such a relatable comment, Steventhen,
Uh-huh.
and I think everyday folks can relate to this. We may, grow up with our story or we learn it at some point and it's meaningful to us, right?
Right.
It's usually part of our faith story. It's something that re-solidifies our relationship with the Lord and how we follow him. But I think I don't want to use the word easy, but it becomes a way of being, I think, the older that we get when we are living our life and maybe we have a career, even if it's church-based, ministry-based. I think it's easy sometimes to think, oh, okay, that fits in that context, but it doesn't fit anywhere else.
Right.
And I think the Lord has this way of finding us and going poke, poke, nudge, nudge. Hey, that thing, that experience that's made you who you are, it's really important.
Right. Right.
And so here you get involved in abstinence education, which, like, I don't think most people are going to go, what I really wanted to do is talk about
Exactly.
abstinence. But I
It's
love that becomes part of your testimony, right? The Lord is like,
yeah.
not only are you going to talk about abstinence, but you're going to figure out through that why your story is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. But I never thought that, I still have people, that have graduated high school that I spent 3 years doing that. And here locally, I live in the area where I spoke in the schools. That was 33 of those schools. And I'll have, people at a drive through be like, hey, you're the sex guy. Right. And I'm like, great. Yeah, that's me. But hopefully you heard some truth and made some better choices. Right.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah. People have
but
said to me before, right? You're the abortion lady. I mean, I can be at the grocery store and people say that and I kind of go, yeah, I mean,
uh,
sorta.
let's rephrase this, right? Let's rethink this. But yeah, like I never thought, and that's just, I've always kind of been this way. My family's been this way. Lord, we want to be where you want us to be. We want to go where you want us to go. And sometimes, that's not what we might have had planned, right? The career, I thought I majored in youth ministry, so I thought I was going to be a youth pastor for the rest of my life. And it's kind of funny, like today, while we're on this podcast, I'm getting ready to go lead worship for high school kids for a whole week. So, I think Melissa too, that I'm not abandoned, right? Those gifts and callings that God's put on my life. It's just, I use them in different ways. Right. And I think we have to be open to what God wants us to do. But with that, I started sharing my story and working that in and what that looks like. I'll be brief so you can ask some questions because there's a lot in there. But, when I was 8 years old, I had some friends of mine at school look at me and say, you're weird and different. I realized that day when I came home that, I'm a brown kid in a white home in the South, growing up in the 80s. I came home that day and I said, Mom, they said my skin color is different. And I'm looking at myself and they're not lying. Like something's not right here. And I found out that day at 8 years old that I was a foster kid. Came into the family at 7 days old, and they officially adopted me at age 2. I found out later that was a big ordeal because the state of Tennessee, where I grew up near Chattanooga, they tried to remove me from this white home when I was 6 months old because my skin color was different. And I had a loving family that literally a community of people, even in the midst of racism, Melissa, like they came together and they fought for me to stay in that home. I still have today 250 petition letters that a community came around this family to fight to keep me. So after about a 1.5 year legal battle, they officially adopted me at age 2. And if I'm being honest, that started a journey for me of that was the first time in my life I remember being broken and asking God why. Why did I have to look different? Why is my skin color weird? That's what they said. Why is my name weird? Maybe some of you guys are watching this and who names their kid Steventhen? We'll get to that here in just a second. But, I'm finding all this out, and I was in really a state of brokenness and just in that why question. But the biggest why was why would my birth mom not want me? Why was I not good enough to keep? And I would wrestle with that for a while, but I always share when I speak, publicly or whatever. I had a drug problem growing up that I'm very thankful for. Let me explain. I was drug in and drug out of every church service known to man, right? I had a family. My first Sunday was Easter Sunday. They took me to church. So, I had a very faith-based, foundational, centered family, never missed church kind of thing. And so in the midst of that pain for me, I came running to Jesus. That little 8-year-old little boy, about 6 months later, I found myself at an altar, just laying all that brokenness and pain and all that why question. It wasn't that I didn't believe in him. I just was struggling to see him there, in the midst of that. So that started, I tease, I was I've been 200 none of your business pounds since seventh grade. It's a struggle. I get it. But I was earthquake in seventh grade. I was freight train in high school. So I dug into sports because I didn't want to be weird and different anymore. I just wanted to be liked and loved. And I would press into that, and I had some scholarship offers to play football in college. I wound up having back surgery at 17. Guess what? Asking God why again. I find myself on this college campus in Bristol, Tennessee. I tell people, yeah, I went there to play baseball. I earned a scholarship. I got that youth ministry degree. But what I think God had me on that campus was to meet my wife. She was a volleyball player. I married up. Literally, she's 5'11" and I'm 5 none of your business. Um, but we start dating. We get married. I moved to her hometown of Tampa, Florida. I was youth pastoring down there. We started trying to have children, and I'm gonna be quick with this, but just very kind of a painful season, but also in the midst of this, beauty was we lost our 8 week old. Our first pregnancy, we lost an 8 week old to miscarriage. Um, I was at church and she lost our baby alone, and that came with a lot of just pain and asking God, guess what? Why again? Um, and then we have Isabella, who was our senior that graduated recently. Then our third pregnancy, we lost a 10 week old. That one we had to have a DNC, so we had to go into the doctor's office. We had to have a procedure, to remove this lifeless baby from the womb, and it messed me up. I'm gonna be honest with you. I mean, it broke me. And here I am, a middle school pastor, about 100 plus, middle schoolers on Wednesday nights. I'm trying to minister to, and what I really am is a depressed pastor, um, because that pain, it was real, and I didn't think that I could let people know about it. I didn't really talk about it. I just tried to press on, and I was really hurting and broken inside. But here's the beauty of what I think God does, and I keep saying think, but it's true. It's true in my life, anyways. That God has the power to step into that brokenness and bring this beauty. And if it wouldn't have been for the pain and loss of those two babies, I would have never gotten to this point. And what is that point? I was sitting in my apartment, 975 square feet apartment, Tampa, Florida, in the midst of that depression, losing those two babies to miscarriage. And God, and what I was looking at was, I'm a dad, the heart of a father. I got to protect my kids, my babies. But I don't know my medical history. I don't know my race. So what God did in my heart was he said, it's time. And what it was it's time to look for your birth mom. Melissa, do you know how many times in my life from 8 years old when I found out that I was a foster kid and adopted, like how many times you can imagine to 27 at this point, how many times I've thought about why, where she's at. Does she love me? Does she care? All those things. But I always say that, God's timing is always perfect. And I think I had to go through that season of brokenness and the whole point is I reached out. I started seeking for my birth mom because of the pain I was going through. I wanted to save my babies. So I got this paperwork from 1982 that night that I was sitting on the edge of my bed with my mom, and she described to me what happened, or how they got me as a foster kid and adopted. They didn't know my birth mom or any of the situation. But I took that paperwork, got on Google, and in 3 days, I actually found my birth uncle. I'm 27 years old at the time. This is in 2009. I fly from Tampa, Florida to Spartanburg, South Carolina. I got to meet him. And as we talked, and he shared with me how I came to be, I found out that my birth mom was actually raped by 5 men. She was 18 years old, mentally challenged. He actually had 5 siblings. He's the only one out of the 6 that's not mentally handicapped, which my mom was one of those siblings. And literally, she was put into a mental facility, and that which she was raped while she was in this mental facility one evening, and they were pressuring her every day to abort me once they found out she was pregnant. And this is, just the power of God and the power of love, and to know that my circumstances didn't define my worth and my value. This 11-year-old mental capacity, 18-year-old woman said that her baby was worth fighting for. And it's because of her, my hero, that she literally carried me homeless and fought for me, or I wouldn't be here today to talk with you. Um, so
It doesn't matter how many times I've heard your story.
mm,
There's so much I can relate to, right? The whole question of identity and right the why. Why did it have to be this way?
Hmm.
Why didn't someone love me? Why was I not worthy? Right? All of those things. And then, right, trying out identity, right? If I just do this, if I just do that, maybe I will feel like I fit in. Maybe I will feel like I belong. Maybe I will feel like I'm worthy. And then stepping out on the other side of it, right? When God shows up, I mean, and I've had a miscarriage, right? I understand that pain all too well. And, God used my miscarriage about the same time, actually, very close in the time frame that you guys
Wow.
experienced your loss as well. And I can remember the depths of my despair. But at the same time, right, I still remember what it feels like when you know that God is filling that space
Hmm.
and is leading you to a different place. And, I've had moments, and I bet you can relate to this, Steventhen, where I kind of like something happens in my life, like the miscarriage or when our second child was born with lots of health issues. And I questioned God, right? Of like, didn't I get this enough, right? Like, didn't I show you that I know, right? Didn't I show you that I'm obedient?
Right.
And when I say it, right, the minute I say it, I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, Lord, I know better. But right, I know that God in that moment is looking at me and going, yeah, I know you get it.
Hmm.
And you don't, first of all, you don't get to decide. You don't get to decide
Right.
the depths to which you will carry a cross, right? And you can't imagine, Melissa, the good that will come from this for you, for your family, for
Right.
other people.
Right.
And I hope that people who can relate to our own suffering, right, whether it's adoption or miscarriage or, some other loss, maybe it's, something that happened in their family. I hope people can take encouragement in that to say, right, God is still there.
Yep.
God is not the one who leaves us. And I think for me, I've had to learn to be so patient in the midst of pain
Yeah.
because my immediate response is like, I want that to go away. Like, I can live with it, but could we not? Could we make this go a little faster?
Right.
And so even from the sake of searching, that's so interesting. First of all, our time frame of searching is very close too. So I found out who my birth parents were in 2007
Oh, wow.
after
Yeah.
almost like over 10 years of searching. But I think the part that strikes me the most, Steventhen, about your search, I mean, not only what you find out about your birth mom and her family, but I think there's something very interesting when we have this like relatable suffering of identity, right? Of trying to figure out who we are and what our worth is. And then we go searching and we tend to find out things that don't necessarily reinforce worth immediately, right? We find
Right.
it
Right.
because we see the hand of God. But I think, I always tell people if you're going to go searching for biological family, you need to be prepared for the fact that what you find out
Hmm.
may be more painful than the questions that you have
Right.
because reality isn't pretty.
Hmm.
And so that strikes me so much of here, you rightfully had sort of that identity question at 8 and beyond for a while. And then when you finally go searching, even though you see God in the midst of those circumstances and the beauty of who your mom is and the courageous person that she was, in many ways, that could have reinforced this belief that somehow you weren't worthy.
Right. Absolutely. I think I think what was important for me is when again, it is hard. It's not all just pretty, right? Like you said, I I didn't have to find my mom, my birth mom, to know that I had worth and value. I think at 27 years old, I had been through enough brokenness and enough, restoration, right? That God had restored enough in my life that I think, That's why I say his timing's always perfect, because I don't know if I would have been able to handle, right, what I experienced with my birth mom. She was in a mental facility at that time when I went to see her. She was dating a 72-year-old man named Ronnie. She's 46, but I mean, she's institutionalized. She had been institutionalized her entire adult life. I had 11 years with my birth mom. She met all three of her grandbabies. They call her Gigi, which was a beautiful thing. But the hard part of it, right? We would go down to visit her, drive 7 hours, and we would get 30 minutes maybe, because she's still in a 46-year-old body. She actually passed away at 57. That's why I said 11 years with her. But I'd take my kids to see her, and it would be in these facilities that the smell is bad. And if you can imagine a nursing home, right? A lot of people don't like to go to nursing homes because of the smell, but there's still people that need to be loved on and supported in there. But she was over medicated, and her weight would fluctuate, and she wasn't really cared for the way she should have been cared for, right? It's kind of a broken system with mental health. And there was just, here's the short of it. I would drive 7 hours, and I'd get 30 minutes with my hero, my mom, and I would turn around and walk away, and I would weep, like, for 2 weeks, like this pain that came with that. But even in the middle of that pain, it was worth it, every second of it, because she deserved to be honored and respected. But I tell people a lot of times, I think, at least for me, I've seen God work enough in my life. There's this foundation of, I know he's good, I know he's faithful, but I don't run from the pain anymore, because I know I have to touch my pain for other people to find healing. And I wasn't there. I'm 43 years old, and it took me a long time to get here, right? But I still have pain. I still have brokenness. It's still not pretty, but it's worth it to touch it for other people to find healing, right?
You're so right. That's why I'm like sniffling over here, because I also relate to that so much. Of my relationship with my birth mother is so sacred, to the point that I don't show up a lot publicly with her, because that's how sacred it is.
Yeah. And people aren't always kind.
Right. And we want to protect them, right? We want to honor them and use their painful experiences for good. But there's something about seeing their pain, and like you said, you're not running from it. It's sort of like it kind of integrates into who we are, right? I am very much an empath, and I know you are as well. And that pain, when you first face it, yeah, it affects us, right? We don't get to just like walk away from every interaction with our birth parent or whoever it is and not be impacted by it. But we learn, and it's the grace of God, I think, that allows us to have those moments, and it becomes a part of our being.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think our world sends a different message to people. I don't know what you would have to say about that, Steventhen. I tend to find that people sort of say, if you're experiencing pain, maybe you shouldn't have done that.
Right. Well, no, here's how much it's impacted me. I have an entire ministry called Broken Not Dead, because like the brokenness and pain in my life has been so powerful, right? Now, I'm not going to sit here and say like, I'm so glad I went. That's hard for us to say, like, but this is something I will say. I wouldn't have changed a thing, right? But I couldn't have said that back then. It was now again, you see the faithfulness of God. You see how good he is to bring you out of that, right? And it's like, I know there's tons of scriptures we could use, but through the process, I love it. Your faith is fortified, then your vision becomes clear. You have to go through the process. And I think that's the beauty of it, for me anyways, that I use that word a lot, that somebody told me a long time ago, or asked me the question, could pain be a gift? And I'm like, when I first heard it, it made me mad because I was in the middle of a back surgery, having sciatic pain. And, I've had two in my life, and those are not fun. And I didn't want to hear it in the moment. But once I was able to get past the pain and really think about that, leprosy, I don't know if you know this, maybe you do. Leprosy, actually, we hear about it obviously in the Word in the Bible, but it's not an outward disease. It's actually an inward disease that kills the nerve endings. But it shows up as an outward sore. So people, like, if you think about that, you've got this internal pain, something going on that you can't see, and if you can't feel it, then you don't react. But when you feel pain, we do what? React. So this is a bold statement, and I don't think everybody should pray it all the time. But I say, Lord, break me, because I realize when I stay broken, I stay in need of a savior, right? So yeah, yeah. So for me, I just, and that's really my heart for people, but especially for the church. It's like, church, look, I get it, you're broken, but you're not dead yet. Life isn't over yet. You're still created for a purpose, and you have worth and you have value. And yeah, it's broken, but that brokenness can always be mended. Just bring it to the master potter and let him do the work. But we have to surrender it, right? And that's my whole heart, my whole message. I feel like, if anything, in my story, beyond obviously standing on stages and standing up for life, right? I think it's a mandate, biblical. We should do that. But also, my heart is for, if you're listening on here and you're broken, you're not dead yet.
Right.
you
This is
know?
not the end.
No,
I think
no.
sometimes we are the ones who are drawing that line in the sand, right? Going,
Right.
this is it, right? God can't do anything with this. I'm too foregone. And that's us playing
Right.
God.
Yeah. Putting limitations. Yeah.
Yeah. And so knowing that you, right, surrendered and you took that broken place and lived in it. I mean, I like the word lived in it, because I often, right, we use the words, well, I sat in it. Well, yes, we sit in it, but I
Right. You got to
think,
be active.
right, it is about living in the brokenness.
Hmm.
And so what did that look like then for you? Because I know how God has taken all of this and used it for good, but what's that look like?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing I just mentioned, I don't want to, I'm not pushing my nonprofit, but, well, so Broken Not Dead really I mean, that really is a battle cry and a mission. It's more than just the name of a nonprofit that I started, that was really I share my Broken Not Dead story every stage I step on, every conversation, opportunity that I had, like even now on this podcast with you, my friend, I'm sharing my Broken Not Dead story. Um, so I, so again, for me personally, that's I'm a singer songwriter. I've written 24 songs. I call them songs of hope. I'm going to Nashville to record one. Actually, in June, in the middle of June, I'll be up there to record one more. And those are, again, that's an overflow of my own brokenness, right? And hopefully these lyrics that can touch other broken people. And then for me, standing on stages and getting to raise money and awareness for pro-life movement and for organizations that I know you and I have a huge heart and love for. But every time I stand on those stages, yeah, it's a fundraising event or a right to life event. But the way I even look at it, bigger picture, is I'm just sharing my brokenness with the world and hoping that me being faithful and obedient to share that somebody's going to find hope and healing and restoration in that. And yeah, we can raise money as well, right? So that's how I approach everything that I'm doing in life. So again, I do a lot of speaking and singing. So I use that, incorporate that. That's my battle cry. But then also, like I said, with this nonprofit, we've been blessed to be able to film now. We have a platform called Broken Not Dead Stories, and we filmed 39. We actually filmed 40, but 39 of them are out on our YouTube channel that we share with the world. These stories have gone literally, to a lot of countries. I can't, at least over 60 I know of. And we have our 40th story coming out hopefully by the end of June. It's being finished up with production right now, and So we raise money to be able to, we identify those stories usually through relationships that I have. I have some other people that are looking out for those stories in the world that we just give a platform to, because I'm a firm believer, kind of that same vein of brokenness and overcoming. Revelations 12:11 says we overcome by what? The blood of the Lamb, which is Jesus. I think it's perfect order. And then number 2, it says, and the power or word of our testimony. What's that? Our stories. So that's it, my friend. I mean, it's just, that's my DNA. Like you, I think you actually said it perfectly. It's just become part of my DNA, right? That God's been too good and too faithful to me, and I could have been in this pile of rubble and stayed there, but not my God didn't let me stay there. I think there was a part that I played where, God, I can't do this on my own, and I laid it at His feet and said, "Here, Master Potter, do your work." And I always tease, but I said I just get to share my cracks with the world, right? You know what I'm saying? All the broken places, because that's where God's been at work. You know?
Well, and I know you experience sort of the same thing that I do, which is this incredible joy of, right, serving God. It is so adventurous. We're never bored, right? I know you're never bored. You are like me. We have to figure out how to sort of like slow down.
Mhm.
It's a process. But there's so much joy to be found in meeting other people and being an encouragement to them. I'm just wondering, are there any like stories that have touched you the most over the years that you could even share just one story on someone who's, been impacted by you sharing yours?
I think one of the most impactful ones was actually before I even started speaking nationally, because there's been plenty of those. People have changed their minds completely, like, their stance on the pro-life issue and things like that. But when I was working on staff and this is going to get me, when I was working on staff at the local pregnancy center, I had actually led worship at a high school retreat or a summer camp, and there was a young Hispanic girl. I think she was 12 at the time, was actually in the audience, and she was pregnant, and I didn't know it. They didn't actually have room for me to share my story, but God intervened, and something happened one night, and they asked me to share my testimony. So I shared unknowingly, that this young girl was pregnant, and I didn't. She had actually been raped by her uncle who lived in the home, and her parents were trying to cover it up. They didn't, they didn't want anybody to find out their business, and so, kind of a last ditch resort, the family was really pressuring her to abort, and she came. A family friend had encouraged them to come to the pregnancy center. I was sitting there, and normally I'm not there because I'm out speaking in the schools, but it was during the summer, so I was in the office. And when she came in with her parents, she saw me. I recognized her, but she saw me and remembered me sharing my story. And that day, she actually went against her parents, pressuring her, and she actually chose life. Well, when they found out what had happened and this family member was in the home that had assaulted her, they removed her from the home. She actually, so this was probably about a year and a half later. I was leading worship at another church, and this family brought this baby and placed it in my arms. And I didn't know who the baby was at first, but it was actually her baby that she had chose life for. And they adopted the child. And that's not it. The end of it, I went to another church a couple months later. It was for a student event. And this young Hispanic girl that I didn't recognize at first stayed after the event with her friend, and they came up to talk to me, and she explained who she was. I remembered it was her. And she was 13 years old at this time, and she was really struggling with, how do I know that my baby knows that I love him? Because I gave him away. And of course, I'm a dad of 3 girls, so my dad heart, I'm crying. I'm also crying because it's just in that moment I realized, thank you, God, for my story. Thank you for my pain. Thank you that I was faithful and obedient to share that day. You never know who's going to hear your story and the impact that it can have. But literally just from that 20 minutes of me sharing my story, she chose life. The baby was adopted. She was adopted by a family and removed from this dangerous situation. And then at full circle, I was able to tell her that night, you're one of the most amazing humans I've ever met, one of the strongest women on the planet. that you loved your baby enough to choose life and do one of the most sacrificial acts of love, and to place him. You didn't give him away. You placed him in a home that could love him better, not love him, but provide for him in a way that you couldn't. And that's what love looks like. So, sorry, I know that was a long one, but
No, it's so good. Don't
that's been,
apologize.
that's been one of the most impactful things that I think, just the power, I guess, of our story that at least I know about.
Well,
You
and
know,
that God has this way. I mean, this never ceases to amaze me how being obedient to God puts us in these positions where we see people time and time again, right? I always say to people when I'm at an event, hey, I know I'm going to see you again. And they'll kind of go, are you sure? And I'm like, mm-hmm, because this
right.
is what God does. And how God gives us these little nuggets of wisdom through our own experiences, the very things that caused us so much pain, that have broken us, that thereby fortify other people,
Right.
right? Anybody could say to her, you made a courageous, selfless decision, but you, Steventhen, your particular testimony carries a far different weight with that young woman than anybody else's ever could.
Yeah. I mean, I recognize that. And I think the word I would use is when those moments happen for me, it's affirmation.
Yeah.
To like right now, I'm averaging being gone from my wife and my kids on the road for 6 months out of the year. I don't like that. I don't like being away from my family that much. But, we keep communication open, we talk and those things. But it's not easy, right? Um, people can look at people like us that travel across the country and do all these events, and I love to travel and I love to eat, I love the food, I love meeting new people, but it also comes with some. I like the word obedient, but it is sacrificial. There is sacrifice at times.
And
But
not
when you
just
have
sacrifice that impacts you, it's the sacrifice that impacts your marriage, that impacts
right,
your family. And I mean, therein lies the other lesson that I think folks like you and I learn along the way, that we pass along to our children, which is, this isn't just our particular calling. This
right,
is a calling for our entire family.
yes. Yes. And that's that communication part that I talked about. Like, my wife has veto power in my schedule. Like, no, you can't say yes to that because you have a daughter graduating, that kind of stuff. But we're in this together, and if it wasn't a togetherness, I couldn't do it. But the reason I brought that up is because it's just affirmation, right? Like those, like what happened with that young lady, a full table of 10 women from a church small group, changed their mind they came in, thinking that, hey, I'm okay with abortion with the exception, right, of rape and incest. But after hearing your story, we've all changed our minds. Like, thank God. Wow. Like, I have to keep sharing my story, Like, I can't sit around and be silent. It's just not possible for me. That's why I love Sir Edmund Burke says the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. Like, I can't sit around and do nothing. It's just not in me. Like, God's been too good, too faithful, and I have a story to share. And but I'm not the only one, right? And that's also what I love about, like, for you and I. Like, I know with your beautiful ministry and organization that you have, it would not exist if if you didn't have your story, like if you hadn't been through. And I love my dad, my adopted father. He passed away in 2014. That's all. I tear up every time I share about him, but I share about him on every stage I speak on when I share my story, because he's my dad, right? And love goes deeper than DNA, color, and blood, you know. But at his funeral or his obituary, we said, God gives his toughest battles to his toughest warriors. And, I'm not any more special than anybody else. I know God has a purpose for all of us, but I do see, you know what? I'm willing to get in the fight. Lord, I'm a warrior. I can take it. And that's not me puffing myself up. I just know what I've been through, and I know what God's brought me through. And I'm ready. Let's go,
Well, and I love that as well, of, knowing your background and, right, being in sports and all those things. So all of those things that, brought you joy ultimately are those characteristics that the Lord gave you in order to serve him. I think sometimes we can know that, we can feel it in our hearts. We sort of, we have that glimpse of it kind of out of the corner of our eye, but then we sort of, after so many years of obedience, we sort of get to see this bigger picture of who God created us to be. And not only is it affirmation, but it is such a part of who we are that if you told me tomorrow, Steventhen, hey, you just won, you won the jackpot in the lottery and you don't have to do this tomorrow. I honestly couldn't sign off on that.
Right.
Because this is simply who I am. And I love that about you. I mean, it's been such a joy to see you over the last, 10 years step into being a successful speaker. You are a successful speaker, not only because you've honed the skills, but because you are who God created you to be. You are just one of the most authentic people out there on the speaking circuit. And that's what your big success is, not just because, yes, you are a gifted fundraiser and communicator, but you are who you are. And that's what people want and need. So I thank you for being who you are.
Well, thank you, Melissa. That means more to me than any of the other accolades. I that's what I love to hear more. When I'm doing I do a lot of keynotes and fundraising events for pregnancy centers. It's a bulk of what I do nationally, but that's one of the things I love to hear, and it's, excuse me, and it's not puffing up or conceitedness, but there is a confidence, right, that comes with that, to know that, man, I'm right where I need to be, but what I love to hear more than anything is, we just love your heart, you're real, you're relatable, and I think that's all I know to be. It's just like, to me, it baffles me sometimes that, Lord, just thank you. Like, how did I get here? And I know how I got here because he's got a purpose, for me and my story. But that's just what I get to do. I'm just sharing my story. I'm just being me because that's what God's done, but then obviously I know there's a gift of the speaking that we know that where we have to make it less about us at some point, and that's what I've had to, to learn. And, but at the end of the day, I'm just sharing my story, Exactly. I love it. Yeah.
As we're wrapping up, Steventhen, I want to give people the opportunity to know, how do they find out more about you? How do they, find out about events that you'll be at, or how to book you, whether it's, worship or, speaking at an event of some sort?
Yeah. Well, Steventhen, I'm the only Steventhen in the world, which, by the way, a lot of people want to know this. My birth mom gave me that name, that 18-year-old, right? Mentally challenged, 11-year-old capacity. She said, I want to name my son Steventhen William, which is my middle name. So I'm literally the only Steventhen in the world. So if you .com that, guess what? There you go. So Steventhen.com, and of course you can find me on all socials, mostly Facebook and Instagram are my two that I'm on the most. But yeah, so I'm exclusive with Ambassador Speakers Bureau on pro-life events. So and there's a booking link on Steventhen.com for that. But all things worship, speaking in churches or any event. I do corporate events as well. That you can, the information again is on Steventhen.com, and there's plenty of video content, things like that. A couple mini documentaries, live action has done some things, 700 Club. Yeah, most people are, get emotional on that. Not everybody, but most people. And then also for the music as well. I like I said earlier, I've got 24 songs that I've been blessed to record. I have a new one coming out, hopefully probably be releasing in the early fall. But all that's on every digital music platform that you can think of, all the whatever you like to use, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, Pandora, iHeartRadio, all the stuff. And occasionally you might even hear some songs on your local Christian radio station. I've had a couple that have charted. So I think that answered most of your.
How about one last question for the Broken Not Dead series? Did they go to steventhen.com for that as well?
You can, but I also have, if you want a direct link, it's brokennotdead.com. So
Perfect.
brokennotdead.com. And I guess I should have said I also authored a book called The Journey Brokenness to Wholeness, which shares my testimony. There's a lot of pictures in there. That's my kind of book. So you get to see some of the characters in the story. So that's of course on Amazon as well. And there's a link to all of those things again on steventhen.com.
Steventhen.com it is. Steventhen, thank you for joining me on this episode of Life
Yes.
Beyond Abortion. And again, just for who you are. The world is a better place with you in it and with you living out your life in the way that God created you.
Well, I can say the same thing about you, my friend. So it was an honor to be on. God bless you and all those watching and listening. Broken, not dead.
Thank you.
Life Beyond Abortion is a podcast presentation of the Herzog Foundation. The views and opinions on the show are those of the host and her guest, and not necessarily those of the Herzog Foundation. You can find out more about Melissa's work at melissaohden.com or by following her on Instagram at melissaohden. Be sure to like and subscribe to the show so that you never miss an episode of Life Beyond Abortion.